Woo, the Nintendo Gaming PC is finally finished. I had a lot of fun building this over the past few months and wanted to make this quick video showing you all some of the highlights on how we got it done and fit everything inside. This is obviously the finished product here that you can see, but before we go back to the start and check the full process with you, just wanted to preface this with kind of the two main goals that I had for this build when I started. First off was to have a discrete graphics card, and secondly was to have I really didn't want to have one of those big annoying external power bricks for the power. Really wanted to have everything inside the unit as much as I could. So these two kind of goals I had ended up being, as you can imagine, probably kind of the bigger challenges, since it took quite a bit of research checking a lot of dimensions, making sure everything would fit and work with each other inside. And then I was just off to eBay to find myself a Nintendo and get started. So here is the original picture from the listing. This is the Nintendo. You can see it's a little bit more yellow. This is the actual picture from the listing. I found this non-working one for about $25 shipped. Here's a quick picture of the back as well. Again, you can see the color of typically what happens to those old electronics once they get some exposure to light and everything. But yeah, I got this one, which was non-working, for about $25 shipped. Once I got it, once I received it, got all taken apart, all the dust and dirt cleaned off, I ended up with this. You can see how distinct the difference is in the colors. This picture really makes it obvious how yellow the exposed plastic had gotten compared to the sections that had been covered up. So to get it looking better, what I did was, which is referred to as the retrobrite process. I'll leave a link to that in the description below. But with not too much work, I ended up with this, which I think looks amazing in comparison. The top shell's basically all one color, and that's exactly what I was going for. You can see here that I had already started cutting away at the inside to make room for my graphics card to fit. All right, just wanted to give you a quick overview of the bottom shell and show you what I did and how I did it. So the bottom is secured to the top with 6 different standoffs or screws, which were here, 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 here. There was one right here and here. As you can obviously see, I had to remove these 3 because they were in the way. So as of now, I'm only going to be able to put it back together with those 3, possibly figure out some other mount for this corner just to secure it a little bit better. There are several other spots where there were standoffs inside that I had to cut down just to get them out of the way that the original Nintendo was mounted to inside. I did end up leaving only these 3 here because this is the little mount for the front panel buttons, so I was able to leave those because I am going to be able to use those front panel buttons. And then this is right here where the controller connections were. I'm going to see what I'm going to do with that, but those shouldn't be in the way when I put those back in. Another thing to notice is this little T section that goes from the back to the 2 sides. Typically this is raised about 1/2 inch up, and it's this whole T section. Technically you could mount on top of that. It's just that it wasn't going to work for me, because if I did mount the motherboard that further up, then the video card would have been too high. So I did have to cut that all out. I definitely had to cut it over here for my power supply that's going to sit here so that it sits flat on the bottom. And then I also had to cut the rest of it out. And then once I cut it out, I shortened the walls and then glued it back on just to give it a little bit more rigidity, and so it wasn't quite as flimsy. It does make the whole bottom piece a little bit unstable when it doesn't have that whole middle section. The aluminum that I put in did help with that quite a bit, but obviously this is a pretty big piece. I didn't want just a huge hole in the bottom, so I was able to re-glue that down so that it's pretty flat, as opposed to being this high up, like you can see with these 2 that are left over. So that helps, so it will am able to mount things a lot further down. Obviously the aluminum that I put in along with my standoffs for the motherboard in the four corners. Everything. So yeah, like I was mentioning, the power supply is going to sit here, the motherboard, and then the video card will plug right into the motherboard and fill in this side over here. As far as the back goes, yeah, this is the front. As far as the back goes, it's going to depend a lot on the specific motherboard you have and the different I/O ports. So even though the motherboard goes from here over to here, I decided to only cut this section out because the ports over here I didn't really need. This is going to be a video port, but because of the display, my video card, I'm not going to use it. But because that port does stick out, I did end up cutting that one out. Otherwise, I would have had to push the motherboard back that way so it would fit, and then that would have messed up with everything else that I have going on back here. So that's why this is cut out, and then just the square, because other than that, it's just a couple other video ports but they didn't stick out of the motherboard, so I didn't need to worry about it. This is where the power supply is going to sit. This is a piece I glued in because this whole square here was inset. A lot like you can kind of see right here how the original audio and video ports, this section is set in. You can kind of see here. Fortunately, this was not in the way of the power supply, so I was able to leave that. But it was a whole inset piece here, so it would have been in the way for the motherboard and power supply. So I cut that out. It just that it left that hole. So this is a piece I glued in. I still need to sand this up to make it look better. So that then it's just the single opening for the power supply here. And then, yeah, like I mentioned, this will be for the motherboard, USB, and network ports. And then the video card actually is going to stick out, and I have the hole cut in the top half that will be here. And I had to notch it out a little bit there as well. But yeah, that's essentially how I had to prep this. Once again, just cutting everything out inside, and then replacing this middle T section, and then getting the aluminum in for the motherboard mounts. And now it's pretty much ready for me to mount everything inside there. Okay, now we're getting into the test fit. As you can see, this is the video card here on the side. It does come right up to the edge. I started a couple vents here just for reference to see where we're going to need to put everything. But obviously the big issue right now is getting enough vents for the video card to pull in some air. Also the cabling over here on the side, you can kind of see I've thrown it in there, but through the test fit, really just want to make sure everything's going in cleanly and it's going to fit and not going to have to cut anything else out. So what I ended up doing for the video card is getting some vents cut on this top half. I was originally going for trying to get it to look as similar as I could to that original vent on the top here. And then there's also a couple other original vents down here. You can barely see them on the bottom, but kind of all throughout, that was the typical vent size and the width and whatnot. So I was trying to replicate that as much as I could. So a lot of those on the top half, and then I threw in a couple more on the bottom, since the fan does go down below the bottom half of the overall unit there. So hopefully that'll give it enough breathing room to pull in some air. Another thing I noticed with the test fit was some issues with the front panel buttons. The original board I was hoping to keep, so I just could wire it directly in, but that didn't work out because that original board, it extended out about this big or so it would have gotten in the way, and so I had to just totally cut it off. What I ended up doing was finding another power button that I salvaged from a totally different computer case and glued that into this little metal mount that it originally came with. And so what's basically going to happen, I'll stick that original power button in, and when you press it, it's just going to hit this other button that I stuck in here. I'm going to be leaving the reset button disconnected. Don't really see a need for having that going. I also didn't want it to get bumped. It does sit right next to the power button. It's not like recessed like a lot of reset buttons are. So I figured I could go without that. So as of now, I'm just going to be having the original power button working, and then also the original red LED light. Those are the two things that are going to be wired in to the front I/O port. It's kind of funny that the I/O pins on the motherboard are right where these need to go. So I wish I had some shorter headers cables, but that didn't work out. So just routing those around. But that ended up working out pretty well for making the original power button and LED light work. In terms of the hard drive storage, I found these little holders on eBay. They were just a couple bucks a piece. Essentially, what I'm doing with these, I'm just going to cut them down really to the minimum of what I need and then glue these into the top. So I have two of these because I had two existing 2.5 inch hard drives that I wanted to use that I had laying around. So here's just a picture of the bottom. Essentially just going to cut these down as much as I can, glue them into the top side by side, and then that'll let me just slide the new hard drives in and out as I need to, while I'll be able to hopefully route all the wires around for the hard drives without too much of a problem, but we'll see how that goes. It seems like it's all going to fit in pretty well. We'll see how it goes. All right, almost finished up. Just want to show you the last couple things I did. I added this little shroud here around this side of the CPU fan, specifically so to force the CPU cooler to pull air from the vent that's right over it. So that this vent here sits about right here when it's closed up. So ideally it'll pull fresh air instead of just recirculating. I also added an RGB strip around the edge. Ideally this is going to show the lights through the fan up here and also through the vents over here that I've cut for the GPU. Just was a short little run there. The hardest thing here was getting all these wires to run for the hard drives that are mounted to the top of the case. Obviously I have the two SATA cables and then the power cord as well. So it's going to be a little bit of a challenge to get this to all go in while I close it up. For the hard drives, I just have a single 1 terabyte spinning disk and then 128 as well. You can see that is pretty crammed in there, but I got it to fit. These little mounts I found were just some plastic 3.5 to 2.5 inch drive adapters that I just cut down, and then these drives I just glued them in and my two drives slid right in. My board does have an M.2 down here hiding away, but I figured, hey, if I can fit it, might as well. And I actually had this SSD sitting around, so that's why I went with that one, and then wanted to go with another one for a little bit more storage. That's pretty much it. Gonna get it closed up now, and hopefully the RGB shows through pretty well. We'll see how it goes. Okay, all assembled. Was a little bit tricky getting it together with all the hard drive cabling, but it worked out. RGB is working pretty well, going through the sides there. Of course, have the original LED light for the front working, and then from the other side as well. And then open it up and just really red inside. Let's see if I can get the lights out, and you can see that a little bit better. Not a lot of focus, sorry about that. But yeah, that's it. I think it turned out pretty well, and I'm really happy with it. I don't know if I mentioned it already, but the hard drive, the power supply, it is a little bit wider than the case is tall. So that's why I added the black trim around the edge, because it does not quite close with as thick as that power supply is on this side. So just add a little bit of trim around the sides, just to bridge that gap between the top and bottom half. But I don't think it looks too bad. Just stuck with very similar colors to the original. The light gray, the dark gray, black, and then I added black, and of course the red accent. So yeah, really happy with it. Hopefully you guys like the video.